Good. You're welcome to start. Paul, again, thanks for coming with us today.
Oh, that's fine. I'm enjoying it. Hi, my name is Paul Mallary. I'm a member of the Western Cascade Fruit Society, the Tahoma chapter, which is the one that hosts the Washington State Fair booth for WCFS. Several years ago, we had a guest speaker at one of our meetings, and I was listening to it, and I found out that he was talking about a fruit that came from the part of the country I did. I grew up in Iowa and Illinois, and he had talked about a pawpaw. I know there's a little village in Illinois, and probably every central state, every one of the central states, called Pawpaw, just a little town. So I knew there was some history there, but I had never been exposed to it. I thought, well, this sounds interesting. Then they went into the description of the fruit, and that really intrigued me. But I perked up my ears when he said something about some people have a negative experience with a little bit of bitterness, and that's something you have to be aware of. So I went on. Now, I'm going to read from my notes here. It's the pawpaw is a tree that grows wildly around the Middle West in rural areas, along waterways, along woods and fence rows. If it's growing near woods, it'll be shorter, and it'll tend to be less leafy and everything. It can also be grown out in the open. If it does, it grows tall. Let me catch up with my notes here. When I was young, nobody that I knew had eaten one, but I found out recently that my relatives in Iowa said they're showing up in the supermarkets now, so they're beginning to get into the market, and I think the growers are getting much more sophisticated in breeding better flavored varieties. The flavor of a pawpaw is described as something like a mango, or maybe its consistency is a little like a banana. We can go to the next slide, I think, Becky.
I was just going to say, make sure to tell me which slides when you want to go forward.
Okay, I'll have, yeah, go to the next, well, okay. The pawpaw grows up in an area more or less defined. It's centered around the Appalachians and the eastern seaboard, and west of the plains till just west of the Mississippi River, maybe as far as Nebraska and Texas. So it doesn't like the dry. It likes more humid areas that are around Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and in the Appalachian Mountains. It has some interesting local names. The name itself comes from an Indian name or French name, and this is the area that was first settled by the French in the central United States. So that may account for the connection between the name Asimina is, or Asimina, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, adapted from Native American name or a French colonial one. And if we'll go to the third, the slide with the map on it, Becky, we have actually the one before that, the one that has the
with the Indian names on it.
Yeah, with the Indian names on it.
Yep, it's up.
Okay, yeah, that's the one that shows you where the spread of it is. It doesn't get down as far as Florida, but it starts in the southern states and goes up, and it goes as far north as the St. Lawrence River, just barely into Canada, mostly south of the Canadian border. The name triloba, as you can see, refers to the flowers, the three-lobed calyces and shaped corollas. You're mentioning its shape not unlike a tricorn hat, which may have come from the French influence. Let me check here. I'll go to the next one. The next slide, the facts. The pawpaw is a temperate zone tree that has tropical ancestry, and technically it's a large berry. I'm not familiar with the definition of berry, but that's getting into the horticultural science end of it. It's in the plant family Ananaceae. It's the only member of that family that is not confined to the tropics. And there, as you can see, it's in that's called the custard apple family. And it has other fruits in it like cherimoya, sweetsop, soursop, and ylang ylang. And I don't know what that is, but Becky, you put there's some oil there that has something to do with oil. So I suspect it has an oily consistency. Anyway, it evolved in the Miocene epoch, which the Miocene was from about 23 million years ago to 5 million years ago. And during that epoch, North America went through a number of warmer and cooler cycles. So this was one of the fruits that developed during the warmer cycles and was able to survive. It had made some adaptations that made it able to survive in the cooler cycles. So it's the only one that made that jump. One of the things, another unique situation with the tree, or a unique characteristic, is that it did not evolve with bees as the pollinators. Bees, of course, had evolved. They were here 130 million years ago, I believe, but they were not the pollinator of choice. And one of the comments I came across regarding the pollinator was the fact that during the Miocene, some of the during part of that period, there were the megafauna, some of the very large animals, and there were a lot of animals in the area. And so those animals being around, obviously there's going to be death in the animal world, and it's going to attract carrion flies and beetles and other things like that. So those became the pollinator of choice for the pawpaw, and they are currently the pollinator of choice. Now, just a minute, let's see. I go ahead and put the next slide up, Becky. It's I'm kind of out of time here, out of sync.
Which slide are you looking for? What's the next one? Here's the next one, was the pawpaw trees.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. The one before that, how about
there you go. This is the native range and the And the
Yeah,
range are suitable
yeah,
to,
that goes to show you the native range. The purple part there is where they're currently growing. And the west edge of it, just beyond the Mississippi River, is when you're getting into the drier climate there. They're warm enough so they could be grown, and possibly with the help of irrigation. Also, they can be grown through California, Oregon, Nevada, and Washington, and Oregon. That means that they can be grown here. I think it takes some awareness of the plant's preferences. So the microclimate is going to be very important. You're going to want to pick a place where the tree is somewhat protected from wind, and I don't think we have to worry too much on this side of the mountain. The tree does not like to be in a very dry area. It likes moist, well-drained soils that have a high organic matter content. And you can find a lot of those soils around Washington State. We find them. My property here has them as well. Excuse me, I'm going to go to the tree, the location of the tree. It can grow in either full or partial shade of taller trees. If it's grown out in the open as an individual specimen, it will be more productive. It'll get much taller in this area, possibly up to, in the Middle West, up to 30 feet, in Washington State, probably less than 25 feet. But if it's grown as an understory tree along a fence row or next to a woodlot where there are taller trees, it won't grow as tall. It will have be less sparse, and it won't produce as heavily. But it will grow in those conditions, for example, so that you can use it as a landscaping tree. And in that case, you might not be so concerned about the productivity. If you are growing it out in the open, be aware that when the tree is young, below 1.5 feet height, it's going to be very susceptible to drought, so you want to be careful about watering. You can also grow this as what some people call a coppice, a shrubby form, where you allow the sprouts that normally come up around the base of the tree, allow them to grow up without pruning them out. And this will form a bush. And this if height is a problem in your location, that you may have more success growing it in this form, and it would bring the fruit down a little closer to the ground. Let me see. As far as one of the things that we'll find with pawpaws is there's a huge variety of them. They're still growing, they're predominantly wild. They grow throughout the woods in the east, in the farm areas along the waterways and that. So there are a lot of individual cultivars, many of which are not worth growing for fruit, because the tree has not had a long history of human selective breeding. The first people, there's evidence that Native Americans had used it as a staple for as long ago as 10,000 years, just after the migration from Asia. Let's see. Excuse me for a minute. Does anybody have any comments? Somebody want to say anything or ask me any questions?
Actually, if you don't mind, if you have comments, if you want to go ahead and type them into the chat, and I will either interrupt if they seem appropriate throughout the presentation, or we'll ask them at the end.
Yeah, there's probably over 100 named varieties and a great number of unnamed varieties in the wild that people use opportunistically. They go for a hike in the woods and pick up some and take them home. The fruit is highly perishable. They can get up to 2 pounds of fruit, very large, or they can be as small as a baseball. And there is one variety that is round and about the size of a baseball. The fruit ripens in late summer, early fall, September, October. Most of it's done by October. When it comes to the fruit, there is one of the things to be concerned about. My purpose in putting together this research is to avoid making mistakes when buying. I know I've made some mistakes in myself when buying a fruit tree on impulse because I simply like it. I bought a Granny Smith about 40 years ago. And in my area near Auburn, Washington, we had a low valley with not a lot of bright sunshine, except for nice days in the summer. And I frankly never got a ripe apple off that tree. So I know it's important picking a good variety, a variety that has the qualities that you like and is able to produce the fruit in that quality in the place that you're going to grow it. The fruit is, there are good characteristics of the fruit. It has a kind of a floral aroma. The flavor is often described as tropical, similar to banana or mango, and it has a smooth custardy consistency, and it's normally very sweet, suitable for pastries and desserts. But it has one characteristic. Some people are sensitive to a bitter aftertaste, and this is not well understood. I haven't heard of any breeder bragging that they're able to eliminate it, but it seems to be kind of more an individual taste thing for some people. Some people are highly sensitive to bitterness, and so this is one you want to be aware of when you're selecting a breed. Once you select one that is noted for its flavor and sweetness. That bitterness can also be possibly, not only is it characteristic of one variety more than another, it's caused by something that may be controllable. For example, one grower said that if you peel the fruit, the bitterness, the chemicals that make it bitter are right under the skin, and you'll remove most of them, which makes it much more controllable. And some of the other things you can do is make sure that you're picking it. It has a very narrow period of ripeness. It's ripe only 2 or 3 days before it's too late. This bitterness may be caused by possibly eating it when it was unripe or overripe. Now here on this which we're on the next, let's see, I'm on the page where we have these competitions. In the Middle West, it's there's the Ohio Pawpaw Festival, and they have competition for the best pawpaws, the cook-off, eating contest, brewers roundtable and tasting. It goes to show you that there are people who really enjoy the fruit. It's recognized as being very good. Not it's just hasn't achieved popularity. I think it just requires a few more years of selective breeding to get varieties like some of the better growers have now available. Let's see. One of the other characteristics that you want to be aware of, if you're looking for pawpaw to buy, is the number of seeds. Some are very dense seeds in the center of the fruit, and they take up a lot of space, so you don't have a lot of fruit. That is noted when I've gone searching for varieties. I note the sweetness and the fleshiness and it comments regarding bitterness, which most growers do not mention that. I think you have to do some additional reading. Are you on the slide, the local favorite, Becky? Yeah. Okay, just went through that. As you can see, there are pawpaw festivals. They're particularly in Indiana. Indiana seems to be the state where they're most popular. In Indiana, a lot of people call the pawpaw the Indiana banana, but we've heard that banana being applied to several other states. In several other states. Also, we have other qualities. For example, the variation in size. Now the next slide number 10, Becky, is other qualities. Yeah. They vary in size, and this can be important if you're going to preserve them. They vary from the shape and size of a baseball to the size of the candle. That can affect the amount of work you put into processing and preserving. And since you will have to do some preservation because of the short period of time you have to eat or process the fruit, best thing is to choose a variety that has a lot of the better qualities bred into it, or a well-documented one from an older source. Okay.
Are you ready for the tree site?
Yeah.
Or do you?
Yeah, for the fruit, other qualities.
Sorry.
Oh, we went through this bitterness.
Yep.
The chemical appears to be called an acetogen, which means it generates an acetyl chemical. But we've gone through now.
This is a pretty interesting picture of the ripening, and I've understood that the third and fourth, or the second and third picture. So
Yeah.
the third one being the ideal eating time, and the fourth one being beyond. So.
Well, yeah. It makes you think of an avocado. They kind of do the same thing. They get kind of shriveled and black when they get riper. But one of the comments that I've seen several times is that let it get all the way ripe, it too soon, because when it gets that last day, the last afternoon of the last day, they are just exceptionally good, even though they may not look good anymore. So they have that. That's the way some people eat avocados. Anyway, the slide number 12 is there's a picture of an ideal pawpaw site in the Middle West, partly shady, and ideal where you would have the understory trees. If you're in Western Washington, again, full sun and wind protection. Native sites, you could plant along. It grows along borders with taller trees nearby and well drained but not dry. It can tolerate wet soils, which is I'm keeping my fingers crossed. There was 4 to 6 inches of water in my yard yesterday, the day before yesterday. But it can tolerate wet soils occasionally, but not heavy clay soils. You want plenty of organic matter and a pH in slightly acid range. Here's a map of the United States where there's the Arbor Day Foundation map. I'm very familiar with that one. The pawpaws are cold hardy down to -20. So you can see they go up into northern Michigan where it can get really cold. And the growth best in zones 5 to 9, that includes us. Our zone is the dark brown, zone 9, or possibly, yeah, 8 or 9. So Western Washington would be in zone 8 or 9. It's pawpaws can be grown in that area, in this area. And there are several ways in which to get your pawpaws if you're starting out. The recommended way is to do like you do with apples and pears, is to get grafted varieties. And at the present time, they don't have a lot of rootstock varieties that are used. They mostly graft them onto seedlings. So your best bet is to make sure you're getting a grafted variety. If you buy a variety that started up from seed, you're never 100% sure that pollination wasn't mixed up and you have some irregularities, some variables in the quality of the pawpaw. So do the grafted variety, but if you're going to buy a lot of them, if you're going to put in a plantation, you could buy seedlings of the variety you want, because you're not going to be constrained the way you would be if you're only buying 1 or 2, or say you buy 2 of them and have a pair, and one of them doesn't breed true to form. You're not going to have, you've waited those years, anywhere from 2 to 7 years, and you don't get what you wanted. So, but if you're putting in a large number of trees, the seedlings may be a better choice for cost control. They normally bear in 2 to 5 years. Some of the older ones take longer. One of the things you look for is the number of years to bearing. That's one of the things I learned to be very conscious of. So starting the pawpaws here, this slide goes through. Pawpaws are not difficult to start from seed. You can actually buy pawpaw seed and start your own. You can. There are several very good books on culture, pawpaw culture, that you can refer to. This this is number 16. Go to number 16. We'll get into pollination. First of all, is true with most fruits. You need two cultivars to provide pollination. With the pawpaws, the pollinators are not bees, as we mentioned. It relies on carrion flies and beetles. So there are people who keep the roadways clear of roadkill, putting it in their pawpaw patch to attract pollinators. The pollinators are not very efficient, so one thing you want to be aware of if you're going them for fruit is that you may have to help it along. What some growers do is manual pollination, and I know some people do that with fruits like apples and pears. Like pears, particularly, are very difficult to pollinate. So people use an artist brush to go into the trees and transfer pollen. And one of the other things with these, they have a characteristic that let's go to the next pollination to number 17. As you can see, there are unique ways to attract pollinators. There is a blossom term that was new to me, but it's protogynous. It means that in order to prevent self-pollination or inbreeding, the male and female parts of the plant are not mature at the same time. In other words, the female part of the plant is mature and is finished, is over when the male parts produce pollen, so that you have to get a different variety in order to have pollen available for your plant. So what some companies do to address this is they sell packages of two plants that pollinate each other very well. You can look for that if you're looking in the fruit catalog. You'll find that feature, and I think that's if you're planning to put the minimum number in for fruit, which would be 2 trees, you'll get the 2 trees that match. And number 18, we're getting into the varieties. Now, let me explain how these cultivars are selected here. As I was searching through the catalogs of the nurseries and other places, I went on the internet and did a very extensive search. There was so little consistency. It's not like you're buying an apple. You go to one nursery and they'll sell you a yellow delicious. You go to another nursery, if you want to buy a yellow delicious, you can. You can buy a red delicious. You can buy a Jonathan or whatever. There's some consistency, but with pawpaws, they haven't achieved that level of consistency yet. So one nursery will be selling maybe 1 or 2 varieties, or I've seen See, yet last year, most of the nurseries I looked at only had, they had probably less than 3 varieties. This year, a whole bunch of new stock is available in some of the better nurseries. But because of that, you will get inconsistent descriptions of the quality of the avocado varieties that they're selling them, because they're selling one variety you can't compare. They're selling 1 or 2 varieties, or even up to 4 varieties. You don't have a lot to compare with. They're going to sell you what they have. So you want to look to a reliable nursery, one that you trust. And I know there are several nurseries I've gone to locally in Washington State, Raintree and Burnt Ridge and One Green World. And I don't go to Starks very much, but those are nurseries that are carrying avocados. And I think you can find some consistency in there. Also, if you're looking around, if you want to talk to somebody, the Olympia Farmers Market, which is open now only on Saturdays, which is a shame because I want to go down Sunday. But the Burnt Ridge Nursery brings a ton of stock down, and they're even open now on Saturday during this period of time. You can talk to the owner. You talk about anything he grows there, and you can see some of his stock available. That's one of my favorite people to talk to, is somebody that owns a nursery. That's a lot of fun. So anyway, we're looking at varieties that I came across listed by a number of nurseries. And I took their description. These are very subjective descriptions. These are, there's very little consistency with them. So I made up a spreadsheet and went through, and all the varieties that I was able to find out something about that were being sold out of the catalog. I wrote down the commentary on those varieties. The commentary is subjective. You have to take it with a grain of salt, but there are some consistencies, and so I've taken those descriptions and applied to the samples I have. We have here sunflower. That's an older variety, and Taylor seems to have a very good variety, and Tay2. Excellent quality. If I see quality described as excellent or superb or very good, that's one that I will consider very carefully. I put these in here so that you can go through them and look at one that you think maybe it's just what you're looking for. This Mary Foos Johnson is in. I think it's an older variety, but it has, the pictures may or may not match the text. I'm not sure. Which I would pay less attention to the pictures. Look at the descriptions. Mary Foos Johnson, good flavor, good quality, and maybe self-fertile. Those are some interesting quality. My suggestion is to go through all of the varieties, the cultivars that I have here, and note down the characteristics, and then go through and find some. I'm going to move to number 19. Number 19, yeah, here we have some varieties. Susquehanna and Rappahannock, I think, are from pretty reliable growers. Here's Davis. Average productivity, kind of small. Rebecca's Gold, 2 to 4 years. One of the things that I did is I noted any description of precocious for Davis, 2 to 3 years to bear. That is fantastic if you're in a hurry to get a taste of it. Rebecca's grow 2 to 4 years, essentially the same as Davis. Um, and now I don't have the precocious qualities on Rappahannock and Susquehanna, but you can see one is early blooming. If you're in an area that gets late frost, you would probably not want Rappahannock. It's not too seedy. You see, there's a fair amount of flesh in that picture there. Susquehanna is late blooming and extra large. Those are characteristics that I think are very desirable, but we'd like to see. What I suggest is you pick out varieties from these that you see here and do a little additional research, trying to find descriptions from 2 or 3 growers for that particular variety. That should give you a good idea of the qualities you can expect, rather than just take the word of one grower, especially if it's a small grower. Here are some other varieties. Shenandoah late blossoming. I looked for what time they were ripe, because I know if we have cool summers, they will be later to set fruit, later to ripen fruit. Late would be late, like in October. That's pushing the limit. If you want to be sure you get the fruit ripe in time, it gets ripe before the tree drops its leaves. Potomac late bloom time, very upright. This was the only one that was noted, very upright. If it's not grown as an understory tree, it will grow tall. Pennsylvania golden, they're 4 to 5 years to bearing. That's not too bad. Those are grafted varieties. When they tell you the number of years to bearing, that would be grafted varieties. Because I think seed growing from seed would be longer, 6, 7 years, even more. Tallahatchie, 2 to 3 years to bear, good productivity and good flavor. That would be a good one right there. And we'll go to slide 21. Slide 21. Sweet Alice, medium large, very productive, good quality. That's a good sign. But I'd like to know, I would like to find out if I decided those were the qualities I was interested in for one of my trees, I would search again for other commentary on that variety. Find if I can find on the internet, or go on the internet and look for a nursery in the Middle West that's selling that, and see what they say about how early does it blossom, how early does it ripen. Prolific. I have a prolific, 2 to 3 years to bear. That's why I bought it. Early blossoming. We don't have hard frosts here where I am very often. We have light frosts in November, December, but rarely have a real hard killing frost. It's medium-sized, good flavor, average productivity, and excellent quality. So you can see they're describing the quality and they describe the flavor. To me, that's redundant, but they don't tell you what they mean by flavor. But I think it means a combination of all qualities, particularly flavor. NC1, I think that's a North Carolina one, 3 to 5 years to bloom. Average seediness, medium large fruit. That would be desirable. 3 to 5 years, I think, is a fairly short time to bearing. There's an Allegheny, 2 to 3 years to bear. Early blossoming, medium large, average productivity. It's just a well-rounded one. I think it's optimistic to think that in Washington State we're going to be bearing in 3 years, 2 to 3 years. I would say we would probably be a little bit longer than this because of our cooler temperatures. If it says 2 to 3 years, I would say 3 to 4. And we'll go to 22. Wells, I believe, is an older one, early blossom time, medium large, superb quality. Now that I only found one that they said superb quality. I would go after that one. They don't say anything that clues as to whether they have a problem with a bitter aftertaste, but I would say under those conditions, that's a high recommendation for good tasting food. Mango, I have one of those. Late blossom time, which I think is probably not a bad idea, and good quality. I think it's probably not going to be outstanding. There's Overly's Chappelle is one of the newer varieties. The University of Kentucky has a project going in their agronomy department, agriculture department. They have a big cooperative extension going in the state. If I said, see, where I see Kentucky State University, I think that's a very good recommendation. There are several of them, and this one tell you the bloom time, extra large. I would see if I could find a website or a producer that says how precocious it is, how early it is going to start setting fruit, because it's got a lot of good qualities. And let's go to 23. Pardon the interruption, my cat is trying to talk to me. On the next page, cultivars, Mitchell, medium-sized fruit, excellent quality. That's a good sign. Wabash, very large fruit. Marie's Joy, early bloom time. I think probably an early bloom time is beneficial. If you're not in an area that has frequent late frost, good flavor, which to me good means average or average plus. And there's Atwood, which is another Kentucky State University, medium bloom time. That's good. Medium large fruit, good flavor, and very productive. I would say that would be a good one for somebody who wants to go into production. And let's go to the next 24. Okay. Peterson Pawpaws. Peterson is a fairly small grower, but I've heard other private growers comment on that. He's pretty reliable in having some good varieties. You could look him up on the internet. Purdue University has put out some literature. There's University of Kentucky Department of Horticulture, Ohio Pawpaw Growers Association, and there's where we get all of those Ohio festival activities. Carolina Nature, I'm not familiar with this. Just North Carolina State University and the U.S. Forest Service. These are all sources of good information. Occasionally, a nursery will comment that Peterson, that they've got some of their stock from Peterson. That's Neil, I believe his name is Neil Peterson. Literature available. Here's the Purdue, and there's a book by Andrew Moore, which is been recommended by several of the websites I've been on, and several of the universities that carry it. Andrew Moore. Anyway, we have here's a list of One Green World. Highly recommend because I bought from them. Oregon Exotics, Rare Fruit Nursery, and Restoring Eden. Restoring Eden's in SeaTac, which is, I don't know if they have any connection with what used to be the nursery down there on Pacific Avenue. Raintree Nursery, I bought from Raintree for over 40 years. It's a tradition I have. I buy myself a gift from Raintree every year. So my quarter acre filled up really fast, and when I moved out of there, there wasn't much room left for the buyer to plant anything new, so they had to tear some of the things out. And Burnt Ridge Nursery, a tremendous selection of Native American fruits of all kinds. Okay, is that our last? I'm going to go through my notes and touch on something that we haven't, anything that we haven't talked about.
Paul, when you're done, I'll run the video from my computer.
Okay, give me about 5 minutes now, and I'll be ready to go to that. I'm going to mention site again. In Western Washington, climate is, particular temperature is a formidable factor. To compensate, consider your location carefully. Where in the Middle West, you might want to pick a partially shaded site. And I talked to, I think it's Mike Olson from Burnt Ridge Nursery. He said you'd want to pick, he said his is right on the top of a ridge. It's cold with a lot of sunshine. You might want to avoid getting the smaller tree. Stay out in the open with plenty of solar exposure is his recommendation. So in summary, I believe that starting pawpaw trees, getting the variety right is really important, more than with most other types of fruit, because there's still so much variability in the selection. You can buy grafted trees that may bear as little as 2 to 3 years, but more realistic, expect at least a year longer than that. We've gone over pollution or pollination, excuse me, and disease. The last thing we haven't talked about is disease. Because of some of the chemicals that are in the skin and the bark, in the leaves and the bark, and even a little bit in the fruit skin, there are very few insect problems. There are a couple mentioned in the literature, names I don't recognize. Rarely a problem. They say I don't expect that we would have the swallowtail butterfly. What is called a zebra swallowtail butterfly lives exclusively on pawpaws east of the mountains. So I don't think there is a population of them on this side of the mountains. Zebra swallowtail. However, when they're present on the tree, most growers say they're so beautiful, we don't care. I'm going to, where I'm planting my trees, they mentioned spread them apart. I'm going to plant mine in little clumps, probably about 8 feet apart, rather than go to the full 15. Um, it's, I've read the literature. They don't exclude it. They simply don't recommend. They recommend, depending on the size of your tree, up to 15 feet apart. But I'm going to try to plant them closer together to improve pollination and to also provide in a cluster. I think they'll provide a little more wind protection. And I may plant some wind barriers around my pawpaw trees. I'm eventually planning to have about eight or 10. I've already bought most of those. Um, Obviously, I'm not going to be reporting on food production for a little while, but I'll keep you in touch. So, Becky, can we go to the video? Okay. Does anybody have any questions?